So participants are joining from their individual computers.
Yeah, exactly.
So it can be interactive also. If I ask for a show of hands, people can do that.
It will be. Yeah.
Good.
So
As soon as you're ready, we can start. You can see and hear me clearly.
Okay. Yeah, we can hear you. At least I can hear you. Ma'am?
Yeah, should we start?
Is Mr. Stefanos audible fully?
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
All right.
Just
another 2
Maybe we're a little early, so we can wait for
1 or 2
to join.
minutes.
Yeah. So now all classes are going on online.
Yeah, all classes are going on online. It's actually right now it's the time for internship. So all our students are doing internship again online, of course. So they are doing online internship, and classes will resume from 15th of July, 8th of July.
Okay. Because I think that these 2 years are very difficult for students. They miss out on a very rich part of the student life.
Yeah,
together. So,
and I think it will be there for another year. We have to face all this.
Yes. And of course, it has also shown that the delivery of teaching can also happen online.
Yeah.
Similarly, in offices also, we are finding that there's a lot of work that one can do. Yeah, so there is a lot of rethinking about
how to locate your personnel.
How things, I don't think it'll ever be exactly the same as before, so there'll be more of a hybrid
process
of interaction and going forward.
In fact, in Philips, we had done it quite some time back. We made the bill payment verification and payment centralized. That was in Calcutta, and whereas the business offices were handling businesses, they were in Bangalore, Pune, and Bombay, and Delhi.
Okay.
So all these bills that were generated, the vendor payments, bill verifications in Calcutta, that is to go to our accounts head, finance head in Chennai, and from where all the payments is to be generated. That time NEFT did start, but not in a big way. But most of the checks were generated
there. Yeah. So now, of course, it's quite commonplace. In those days,
we had to do it because since Philips started their operations from Calcutta, we had a very good trained manpower available in Calcutta. And whereas the business shifted from eastern zone to the west and north and south. So that way we had to be, in order to utilize the trained manpower that we had in Calcutta, we made that arrangement. But it worked well. Worked well.
Great.
I think it's 5 now. We can start.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Good evening. This is Sudeshna Ghosh here, and I extend a very warm welcome to all the esteemed guests and participants present here today. I welcome Mr. Saurav Ghosh, Senior Advisor, Shikshayatan Foundation, Mrs. Bratati Bhattacharya, Secretary General of Shikshayatan Foundation, Dr. Suman Kumar Daw, Principal in Charge, Calcutta Business School, Professor Siddharth Sengupta, our moderator for today's program, and all professors, students, and staff of Calcutta Business School. Today, the topic of the webinar is Preparing for the Corporate World, and we have Mr. Abraham George Stefanos, Managing Director, Tata Steel Downstream Products as the main speaker for the day. Before we start, let me give you a brief introduction about Shikshayatan Foundation, which is the apex body of Calcutta Business School, and its background. It all started in 1920 when a group of eminent industrialists started the Marwari Balika Vidyalaya. In 1954, the Sri Shikshayatan School came, and in 1955, the Sri Shikshayatan College. In 2008, Calcutta Business School was added to this. All this was achieved under the umbrella of Shikshayatan Foundation, under the stewardship of Mr. S.K. Birla, President and Director Emeritus of the Trust, Mr. Siddharth Birla, Vice President, Mr. G.K. Khaitan, Trustee and President, Shikshayatan College, Mr. R.S. Goenka, Trustee and Managing Director of Emami Group, and a host of other eminent industrialists. Mrs. Bratati Bhattacharya is the Secretary General of the Foundation. Calcutta Business School offers a 2-year full-time AICTE-approved postgraduate diploma in management and several other certificate programs and management development programs in its sprawling, lush green campus just 3 kilometers from the Swaminarayan Temple near Joka. It is a residential business school for boys and girls, offering experiential learning and excellent placement. We would like to show you a small video on our campus, and I request Mr. Sunil Ray to play the video, please.
If excelling is your essence, then you are welcome to Calcutta Business School. Center of Excellence, centered on excellence.
It all started in the year 1920 when some eminent industrialists of Kolkata founded the Marwari Balika Vidyalaya. Later, in 1954, Sri Shikshayatan School was founded, and in 1955, Sri Shikshayatan College came into being with the objective of further propagating quality education to girls. All these institutions have continued to excel under the management of the Shikshayatan Foundation.
It has been guided by industrialists like President Mr. S.K. Birla, Director Emeritus, Birla Brothers Private Limited, Mr. Siddharth Birla, Vice President, Mr. G.K. Khaitan, Trustee and President of Shikshayatan College, Mr. R.S. Goenka, Trustee and MD of Emami Group, and many other reputed industrialists. The Secretary General of the Foundation is Mrs. Bratati Bhattacharya.
Greetings. I would like to speak a few words about our institution, the Shikshayatan Foundation. The year was 1920, when some of my forefathers thought that female education needed to be propagated much more actively than was the custom in those days. And we donated from our family 2 buildings in the heart of Bada Bazaar for the girl child to be educated there. That institution is still working. The latest addition to our bouquet of institutions has been the Calcutta Business School, which was started a few years ago on a 15-acre plot of land and not very far away from IIM Calcutta.
Calcutta Business School offers an AICTE-approved, autonomous, 2-year full-time residential program on postgraduate diploma in management, majoring in subjects like finance, marketing, IT, operations, and human resource. But it's the unique cluster of courses that sets it apart. Interactive and intuitive games like management game and stock market simulation game. It also puts heavy emphasis on data handling and business analytics and uses databases and software like CMIE Prowess, MetaStock, R, and SAP.
Kolkata Calcutta is the city of joy. It is the cultural capital of India, a city which has its soulful embodiment of culture, love, mystery, respect, and enthusiasm. A city that upholds a perfect juxtaposition between the old world and the modern one. It has given us many Nobel laureates over the years. It has iconic institutes like the Calcutta University, the National Library, Presidency University, Bishwa Bharati, IIM Calcutta, and many such legendary institutes. Calcutta Business School's AICTE approved PGDM program is carrying forward this rich legacy of Kolkata.
Thank you. Without wasting much time, I would now request Professor Siddharth Sengupta to introduce our guest, Mr. Abraham George Stefanos, and take the webinar forward. Over to Professor Sengupta.
Thank you, ma'am. It's a great evening today, having Mr. Stefanos with us, delivering a talk to our students and our guests here. So this is not the first time I'm meeting Mr. Stefanos. I met him when I was talking to him last year, day yesterday. Told him we met him in one of the conferences in JW Marriott. That was the first meeting first. And so now I've got the task of introducing him. Now, he being a very modest person, is only 2 or 3 lines that he has sent from his office. So he is an engineer, mechanical engineer with a PGDM from IIM Calcutta. And he is right now the managing director of Tata Steel Downstream Products Limited. He started his career with Indian Aluminium, Indal, of Aluminium Canada in 1984, where he held various positions in the smelter, extrusions, and the foil and packaging divisions. In 1997, he joined the senior leadership team of Tata Steel Downstream Products Limited, and then it was known as Tata Ryerson Limited, where he held the positions of Chief of Market Planning, Vice President Marketing and Sales, Chief Operating Officer, and Executive Director before being appointed as the Managing Director in 2014. He is member of the CII Eastern Regional Council and President Designate of the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry. In addition, he is the chairman of CII Green Co Forum, Kolkata chapter. He is also the secretary of the Indian IIM Calcutta Alumni Association. Welcome, Mr. Stefanos again, and to the talk, and we are really privileged to have you here. So now it's over to you. And I would just lead you to the talk, like how one should prepare for a corporate role. And we'd also like to hear how you had gone about it, that you can, the way you would like to tell us, you can do it. Over to you, Mr. Stefanos.
Thank you, Professor Sengupta. My greetings also to Mr. Saurav Ghosh, Pratati Bhattacharya, and other dignitaries who are attending from the Calcutta Business School and Sri Shikshatan Foundation. And so I just like to ask, I saw that there were 25 people in the thing. How many are students?
About
have a show of hands.
18 maybe, 18. So others should be joining anytime.
Yeah. No, that's good because, you know, whatever I wanted to say, I wanted to actually direct it towards students. And the reason for that is the life of a student is very different from the life in the corporate world. And students come through a very high pressure environment nowadays. Everybody's competing for the job that, probably somebody else is grabbing. And there are very high aspirations, very large expectations. And quite often, in my experience, I've found that when they join the corporate world, there is a lot of confusion. And it is nothing new. So like Professor Sengupta said, even when I joined the corporate world, we probably joined without knowing much about how the corporate world works. And we just learn things on the way. But it would have been very good if we were a little better prepared for it. And so let me start by making a few general observations. When one is moving from a student life to the life of a professional, really what the corporate world is about, you're actually starting to take care of yourself. Till now, somebody else was taking care of you, whether it's the parents or the college, etc. And the biggest, for some people, this transition is very easy because they've already been doing it. But for many students who joined the corporate world suddenly, and we have seen that when we have a GT program, and for the first 6 months, because they have to go visit different locations, go on different experiential programs, etc. So everything is taken care of by the company. But after the 6 months, they're expected to be posted somewhere. I mean, they will be posted somewhere, most certainly not in their hometown, because that's quite rare. And then suddenly you find that now you got to take a house, you got to manage things yourself, which somebody else was managing for you, not in a hostel or anything like that. So this becomes a big mental shift that you have to make, and it actually distracts a lot of people from the job they are supposed to do. The second part, which I've seen, is most people are unhappy with their job. Not because of the company or anything like that. They're unhappy because it is probably not the job that they wanted. Typically, we found that then when we speak to the students, we try to understand also what's troubling them. And quite often, somebody who wanted to be in the IT sector has now found himself in the manufacturing sector because that was the job he got. And he feels that, look, my career is gone, or I am a loser. Or he has seen that among his peer group, somebody else has got a better job. Maybe somebody else has got what seems at that time to be a not so better job, but they only look at the ones that are better. And so there's a lot of pressure that comes in trying to manage these expectations. And so what they really want to do is they want to start applying for the next job or apply for higher studies, etc. So this creates again a different set of dynamics, which again interferes with them doing their job properly. So how should one go about it? Okay, I'll start by saying that usually every year when we take GTs or MTs, I have a session, couple of hour session with them, and I tell them that first of all, don't worry about your job. Most likely, this is not the job that you'll retire from. Okay, and 99% certainly I can tell them that you'll probably not retire from this job because it's quite unusual. But the first 10 years or so, only worry about whether you're learning something. So the job that you entered really doesn't matter. But the first 10 years of your career matters a lot because that's where you get a learning opportunity for frontline learning, really where the market meets the customer or whichever function it is, at the Gemba, as they call it in the Japanese terminology. Later, if you are a successful professional, you move away from that Gemba. You'll be managing things. You'll never get that type of opportunity to learn. So the advice I give them is that all you need to do is, are you in a job where you're learning, which gives you an opportunity? And even if you're not in the industry that you like, this is where you are today. Tomorrow you might be somewhere else, but where you are, you should be focused on learning. And because that's the learning that will carry you in a big way to the rest of your career. So if I can talk about myself, I didn't do my MBA directly after engineering because I wanted to be an engineer. And I really thought that, I still think that the engineer's role, if you have to be a good engineer, you have to work a lot more and you have to keep updated a lot more. And it's a much more difficult role than probably some other non-technical roles. But the fact was that after working for 10 years, I understood the dynamics of the workplace is that you cannot be an engineer all your life, or you cannot be a technical functionary all your life because your role changes as you move along. And that's when I decided to do an MBA. So I actually was the oldest student in my batch at IIM Calcutta. I started working in '84, but I went for my MBA in 1994. But I think I was lucky because I really enjoyed it and I could look at the course from a different perspective. But how is this role changing? I mentioned that you can't be in the technical role because typically when you join an organization, you can say delivering tasks. So you're in a you're generally given tasks at the most junior most level. You're given tasks and you're delivering on it. Most likely you're a member of a team. So you have a role as a individual task deliverer, plus you have a role as a team member. Very soon, you would probably need to assume the role of a team leader. In a company like ours, quite often that happens within 6-7 months because we try to give very early responsibility and empowerment. Soon after that, you might find yourself heading a function or a department. And beyond that, you may be moving into a general management function. So those roles, you need to actually get engaged less and less with the technical function that you're trained in, but more and more with managing teams, managing dynamics outside your role, managing external stakeholders. So those skills become much more important. Your basic qualification and understanding of business that you imbibed in the initial years of your work, that will help you to understand what's going on. But the expectations from a role would be very different. Today, this happens even faster. About 6 months back, I happened to have a conversation with the leader of a large international organization, a company which is well known for their dynamic culture. And I realized that when I was talking to this gentleman who was one of the people who actually score at building that culture, I realized that they plan for the average life of a person in their organization only for about 3 to 5 years. That's the thing, because they say that after that, they may not be able to provide growth to them. There are very few people who do. So in that 3 to 5 years, people move from role of maybe practically a task deliverer role to quite substantial and senior roles where they have to they're looking after a significant part of the business or a new business, things like that. So the dynamics of this role transition in organizations has also changed very fast, and probably less so in manufacturing organizations rather than other organizations. So what happens? I mean, what actually makes you succeed? And here, I think that students have to understand what makes you succeed in the corporate world. You have to unlearn a lot of myths that we carry. It's the baggage that we carry then when we come from our student lives into the corporate life. And I'll come to that in maybe in a couple of minutes. For a corporate organization, largely, what the expectations from people are focused on outcomes. Number one, and if it's an organization like the Tatas, it's also focused, probably in Tata's, number one would be the values. So Tata stand for leadership with integrity and ethical business values. And we look for the same thing from our employees. So what we want first is for the employee to, his personal values to be aligned with the company's values. And if you're looking for a job, that's something that I will advise everybody to consider, because this alignment is really very important. That the company's values should align with the personal values, and as an employer, we are also looking for it in the other way. And the reason is that if you really want to commit yourself and in the long term to learning, doing things, delivering value to the organization, then you will not be able to do that if the organization's values are very much different from your personal values. I have come across situations where people didn't have a choice, and then they work in an organization where they are expected to do things that don't align with their personal values, and it becomes a miserable situation where the person, whatever you do, even if you're delivering well for the company, you'll not be happy at work. So that is something that you have to look at very early on, because that's the only thing that should help you choose where you want to work. And the second is what I mentioned earlier, that are you learning? The work that you do give you an opportunity to learn. Having said that, this focus on outcomes is very different. When very different from what the student would have encountered in his previous life. When people join us, we, especially at the junior level, we'll say that, look, your qualifications have brought you here, but where you go from here will depend on what you deliver. And it really does not matter whether you are a matriculate or you're an MBA, but having joined, so we've considered all that when we recruited a person. But now where you go from here will depend on what you deliver. Of course, this is not to say that qualifications don't matter, because for certain jobs, when we look at certain roles, whether people have potential for those roles, then we also look at their qualifications, because people, for example, let's say that there is a role of a senior finance professional. It probably helps if you got a finance qualification. A person without a finance qualification would probably have needed to learn all that and delivered well if he has to be considered for that role. So therefore, and this is something very difficult for people to accept, because typically say any good business school like yours is, you'll have students coming, who have done well in their earlier education. They have come through a system where they've competed and got here. And our system makes you believe that, okay, if I have this qualification, then I've made it, or I'm entitled to this. But the truth is, in real life, that is not what happens. Okay, that happens only in our to a great extent in our academic system, which is, highly structured. And it probably gives us a wrong sense of what will happen, which is why when you see the people are rushing to acquire qualifications and they spend huge amount of money going to IIT or IIM or wherever, and in the hope that at the end of it, you will be ahead in the rat race in some good company. But it doesn't make that much of difference. But what you deliver makes a world of difference. What do I mean when I say what you deliver? One is the task that you are expected to complete, but that's only in the beginning. Later on, how you work with your teams, how you can facilitate others to be successful, those things matter much more. How the organization can depend on that person. And we notice this difference in the first 6 months itself when somebody joins, that there are people who can say that, okay, this guy, we can entrust him with this responsibility, or, you can depend on this guy. And there is somebody else who can say that, okay, that person will need a lot of help. So organizations are looking, because today the business environment is such that you don't have large offices. You're largely expected to work unsupervised, and you probably have to do a lot of learning, planning, etc. on your own. So building your credibility with the organization is extremely important, and that can only happen not just by delivering on the task, but also by demonstrating your people skills. Because as I mentioned, when the role changes from a task deliverer to a manager to a business leader, then your people skills, your networking skills, how you can engage with outside stakeholders, all this matters quite a lot. Now let me spend a couple of minutes. I'm sorry, Professor Sengupta, how much time do we have? Up to 7 o'clock, isn't it?
You can go on. I mean, we said that it will be 45 minutes your talk and then 15 minutes for
Yeah. Yeah.
But
so
if you, want to extend, no problem.
Yeah. No, I don't need to extend, but I just needed to know. So I'll talk about. Let's say that about 5. Not 7 o'clock. It's 5 to 6 or 5 to 7.
5 to 6.
5 to 6. Yeah. So about 5:50, and then we'll break for questions, if any. I think that should be all right. Okay, so now I want to talk about some of the typical myths or the baggage that we carry as students, and it's the baggage that I carried, a lot of my friends carried, and I even still find people carrying that. And some of this may sound very counterintuitive or controversial. So the first baggage or the first myth I have to talk about is something I mentioned, that we have this myth that performance equals reward somewhere, because that's why we want to go into better and better schools, get better and better qualifications, because we want to demonstrate our performance, and then at the end of it, you have the pot of gold. It's quite jarring when you learn that in the corporate world, this is not necessarily true. Performance need not necessarily lead to commensurate reward, because it's an imperfect world. So there's a very insightful business saying that says that in business, you do not get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate. And this is something that we have to remember all the time. So performance is not equal to reward, and we just have to accept that the world is imperfect. In the perfect world, yeah, that would have been true. In the imperfect world, you have to not only perform, but you may also have to negotiate. And if you're lucky, yes, you may get the reward that your performance brought in, but there is no guarantee. And quite often this is very frustrating, especially for people who are very good at performing their tasks. And then at some point they wonder, why that other guy didn't do the task so well. So why did he get promoted instead of me? And the difference may be that that person is better at his people skills, or he is he's better at managing the team dynamics, etc. And he is ready for that role, whereas this person is maybe super qualified for the task role, but not ready for the next role. So it's a big area of frustration that I have observed, because quite often we have to counsel, mentor young people who join us, and these type of questions come. Another baggage that we carry with us is again about success. We often think success means outcompete. And that is what we are taught, because when we are in school, when we are in college, there's a ranking system, and somebody comes out on top and somebody comes at the bottom. And success means being on top. This is actually, even in businesses used to compete with each other, and success means outcompete. But this notion is fast going away. Today, success means out collaborate. Okay. Businesses have become so complex, and it is the same thing in work. Work has also become so complex that the people who really succeed in the long term on a sustainable basis are people who can collaborate better. So success is not outcompete, but success is out collaborate. Those who can collaborate better, because there are many businesses where you only do a part of the value addition, or part of the value that gets delivered to the customer, and you have to depend on many other partners to deliver other parts of the value. And if we cannot collaborate successfully, the business will not succeed. Perhaps you might have heard it said that today it's not individual businesses that compete, but it's complete supply chains that compete with each other. There are many entities in that supply chain, and if you're in a supply chain that's not good at collaborating, probably you will also not succeed, however well you are doing your part of the business. So this is another part of the baggage that we need to kind of reset. It's a mental baggage, and it's something that I often share with the thing, because quite often when people join an organization, and they are trying to outcompete each other at the cost of the overall business, we can say, and that really doesn't help. So these are the things that actually leaders look for when we are looking at whether a person has potential. Is he good at collaborating? Another important thing that one has to remember, again, another baggage that we carry, or a myth that we bring into the workplace, is that every problem has a solution. And this myth, I often find people with engineering background, like myself and others, we start with this mindset, because typically people who go into the quantitative lines, and I'm thinking quantitative lines, physics, maths, chemistry, and all this type of things, it's just because we like neat and clean answers. So the problems have to be defined well, and there are neat and clean answers. So usually one operates in a situation of certainty, that okay, if it's a trigonometrical problem or this thing, that certain things are known, and then in very rare occasions you may have multiple solutions, but yeah, every problem has a solution. But in real life and in the corporate world, every problem doesn't have, some problems may have clear solutions, but all problems, and the real serious problems that businesses have to deal with, or corporates have to deal with, they do not have a clear solution. We often have to take decisions under uncertainty, and decision making or even framing questions under uncertainty doesn't come naturally to people who are from a technical background. I find that people who are from the humanities background or economics, they find it much more comfortable to deal with problems under uncertainty than people from a technical background, because their entire training has, prepared them to deal with problems that are very clear and which have clear answers. Let me tell an example. Let us put ourselves in the shoes of our Prime Minister, who is beleaguered with this COVID thing. Does this problem have a single solution? That the problem of eliminating COVID from India? It's a very, very complex problem. When you just think about it, it's obvious that it does not have a single solution. It's a problem where decisions have to be taken under uncertainty, and typically one has to accept that one looks for the best solution, the solution that has the highest probability of succeeding, and one cannot have everything hunky-dory. So this is another big part of the baggage, which one has to really reset mentally when one gets into the corporate world, especially when one moves into senior levels. Quite often people say, no, now you're the boss, so you can solve this problem, or you can find a solution to this problem, and that may not be the reality. I have a few other things which are actually meant purely for students, because many people come with the sense of relief that finally I can stop studying. I've studied for 20 years. I've come into this job. Finally, I can stop studying. And this is the most troublesome myth, because you can never stop studying. More and more, one has to be continuously learning, continuously reading, and continuously educating yourself. So the bad news is, sorry, you can't stop studying. Maybe you can stop giving exams, but you can't stop studying. And this is a question that has become even more relevant, because the average mortality, if you talk to, the other day I was talking to the managing director of one of the Tata Group companies, which deals with insurance. And to my surprise, he told me that, look, people like you and me who have had a reasonably good education, who have access to good health facilities, who are living in an urban environment, he told me that for their mortality calculations, they are taking it as 100 years. That, when they want to insure a person, they look at, is he having access to this thing? Did he have good nutrition going on, etc. So you are expected to live for 100 years. And I can tell you, the students of today, their mortality will be calculated maybe 110 or 120. We don't know, because that's a long way in the future. But today, what he told me was people like me, who are not, not really a fitness expert, fitness enthusiastic or anything like that, just taking normal care of health. They expect that people will live to 100 years, which means the old model of 20 plus 40, 20 years of education, schooling, whatever, and then 40 years of work, and then you retire. That is no longer applicable, because you are going to be alive for another 40 years. And for most of that time, you are going to be reasonably healthy. You have to be doing something. And today, because technology and the dynamics of business are changing so fast, even in your regular workplace, you are expected to quickly learn and relearn things. So the ability to learn becomes a very important factor in your success. And this is again something that we look at when we look at somebody's potential to grow to higher levels, that does this person have the ability to learn? Because there are quite a lot of people who are very good at their current level, but they are not able to move forward because they haven't been able to learn new skills or learn new applications. So I will encourage all of you to put this out of your mind that you can stop studying. You have to be studying all the time just to be up to date with your business or your area of work. And let me put it in another way, that I mentioned earlier that the first 10 years focus only on your learning. That is a little different from studying, because that 10 years you may be learning about that specific work that you're doing, what's happening on the ground. But studying is acquiring new skills, because the business you started with may not exist anymore. The other next myth I want to talk about is myth that's usually carried by MBA students. So remember, I was also an MBA student, an old MBA. That an MBA, having done an MBA, qualifies you to be a manager, and how it qualifies you to be a leader. And so people expect that they'll be in a job where they're managing a lot of people or they're leading a number of teams, etc. And this is not true at all. Having done an MBA, you get exposure to a lot of specific sciences like marketing, economics, behavioral sciences, many of them, maybe supply chain management, product management. You get exposure to a very wide variety of subjects which you have to draw upon in your work, and which will definitely help you dealing with a wide variety of business situations. And but it does not mean that having done an MBA and having become familiar with a large number of subjects that qualifies you to be a manager or a leader. That depends very much on your team skills, your people skills, etc. So again, just like you spend your first 10 years working on learning as much as you can about the business, you also spend the initial part of your career, or rather all of your career, focusing on how you can be a better manager or a better leader, which means you are making other people successful, collaborating with other people, how you can do that better. And that, maybe in an MBA, you learn it as a subject, but here you need to learn it in practice. There are many opportunities for that, even outside your formal education. People who've been in leadership roles in a sports team, or there are now most colleges give people opportunity for leadership in some cultural event and all that type of thing. That really helps, because we've seen that people who actually held those type of responsibilities, they are more comfortable with working with people and getting work done through other people and providing leadership. So this is again baggage that one has to delete from the mind, that an MBA qualifies you to be a manager or a leader. And finally, let me tell you that this is all debate in most institutions during placement time, and that is the myth that the higher CTC is a better company. And this is, let me tell you, this is absolutely not true, and it leads to a lot of frustration, because even when I was studying in the IIM, and there would be a lot of discussions about, all the IIMs have a way of arranging companies that come for placement on day zero, day one. I mean, I think this day zero started when during our time. But day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, etc. And then finally, companies who are even outside, right? And after all is said and done, and people want, growth opportunities and learning opportunities, and then you find that at the end, the companies are largely arranged by CTC. So even without knowing anything, somebody can just look at the CTCs offered by the company and arrange them. But that's just the beginning, the point at which you enter, and that has nothing to do with whether you're in a better company or not. And quite often people are frustrated that, look, I missed that company that was giving the CTC and then I got it here. What really matters is things I mentioned earlier. Do your personal values and the company's values align? Do you get an opportunity to learn things here? Do you get an opportunity to take responsibility here and learn how to be a leader? Does this company entrust you with serious responsibility? All those things. And you can think about all that after 10 years, but put it out of the mind that higher CTC means a better company. Higher CTC probably means that the company will make sure that it gets a lot of value out of you, and you're probably not going to have much time to focus on your own personal development or growth. And there are good companies which also give good CTC, but that should not be the criteria on company that you choose to join. So let me just end my comments here because it's about 10 minutes to 6. And I just thought that I'll share some of my thoughts and observations by seeing batches and batches of young professionals who come and join us, and some people do well and some people become very frustrated, some people move on. But if the earlier you get rid of this baggage, the better you'll do in your career in the corporate world. Because ultimately the corporate world is focused on outcomes. And those outcomes is not just the task that you deliver, but how you deal with your teams, how you deal with external stakeholders, all that becomes very, very important. So I am not very, so thank you. I'll thank you for giving me this opportunity to address, and I'm not really sure whether this is what you expected me to talk about, but I'll be happy to take.
Sir, actually today lot of students are telling us they are unable to join because of the bad weather, and there are a lot of thunderclaps and rains, and they are calling us to say that are unable to join. We are video recording the whole thing and we will be sending it to all the students, plus this will be uploaded on social media as well, so they will all get to see that. And we are very sorry that many students could not join. They're telling us because they could not log in because of bad weather and their broadbands are not stable.
Not an issue as long as they are able to look at the recording later on.
Yes, we will be sending them.
Yeah. So I saw that Ratati had her hand up, so that something that she wanted to ask.
Yes, so maybe just by chance.
Yeah, okay. So
sorry, I think this has gone by mistake, but I would request Professor Siddharth Sengupta to get questions from the students.
Yeah, they are. I will already come out.
But let me thank you, Abe, that you have made time for us. And I was listening to all your leadership and whatever you said. I think it's going to add a lot of value to the students when all of them hear. Usually we do a live streaming, but because today we have done it on Microsoft Team, probably this doesn't allow for a live streaming. So otherwise, we do have a Facebook live streaming. I think because of bad weather, also what Sudeshna has said, is a little difficult, but otherwise we'll take the question. Shrudeshna, I think you can coordinate with Professor Sengupta and give it to Mr.
Thank you,
Stefanos.
Pratik. Pleasure to be here.
Sunil, is the chat box muted? I'm not able to see the chat box. Sunil?
Yes, the chat box is on. It's there.
No, chat.
The questions are not coming up. Okay, I may ask Visha. Yeah, there's one. Vikash Haldar, one of our second year students, he has asked, what are the attributes sought after by corporate while employing students, as freshers?
Okay, so I think I've covered some of that. We normally look for, we don't go to the top tier institutions because for our business model, we feel that we'd like to take good students. We believe that there are good students and good institutes, but the individual matters a lot. And what we typically look for is one is whatever field, whether it is marketing or finance or whichever area that he's in, does he have a good understanding of the subject at whatever level he's expected to be, and does he have a practical understanding, not a theoretical understanding? Is he able to apply that knowledge? And typically our interviews and things like that would be structured around that. The second is we try to gauge how that person will be at work. Okay, so he sees somebody, all those little things that I talked about, he sees somebody that will always look for somebody else telling him what to do, or is he somebody who will show self-initiative? Can he work unsupervised? Will he learn by himself? And there was something I missed to mention earlier, that you should never put the responsibility for your education on the organization. Organizations will maybe train you in what they want you to be trained in, but what you need to be trained or what you want to be trained in may be different. So you should take responsibility for your own education. Some of it may get delivered by the organization, but you should always keep that in mind. So we look at whether that person is able to learn, and through group interactions, we also try to see whether they are good at managing team dynamics. Because are they good team members? Are they also people who can contribute in the position of a team leader? Because if you naturally don't understand the dynamics of a team, it becomes very difficult, and there is a limited growth path for that person. And some of this, it may not be possible to gauge. So when we look at past performance, past records, and also see in the interaction whether the person is likely to fit the bill. But definitely within a few months of people joining, typically one has a much better understanding. Some of the things that it's impossible to gauge, although we've been doing interviews and all, like whether a person is a lazy person or a hardworking person, very important, because in the interview or that forum, you'll always put your best foot forward and make all the promises. But then we find that some people are very capable, but after having recruited them, they just suffer from bad habit of being lazy or being extremely unorganized. It's something which is absolutely impossible to gauge in a very short interview. So I hope I've been able to.
Absolutely. I wanted to add what you said about the attitude.
Yep.
So the attitude to learn and work.
I think a lot of that is attitude. You're right. A lot of that is attitude.
So you have partly, another question you have partly answered though, but anyway, just some of the finer points you can touch upon. Yes, one of our students, your Sheta, she is asking what are the important parameters employers look for while considering for promotion? I think that's
Okay.
quite a part
For
of
promotion, yeah. So this is a little different from when we induct a person new. When we look for promotion, then we are actually looking at the potential, whether the person has the potential to fulfill the demands of that role. Typically, promotions are tied with higher responsibilities, wider responsibilities. Just imagine that you're a team member. You just joined, and at some point, you want to be made the leader of the team, or you want to be, the company is considering a leader for that team. So here, really, your potential to be leader, it's a potential that matters, because as you might have heard, there is something, I think it's the Peter Principle. So there was this series of books written by Dr. Lawrence J. Peter, which are very popular in the 70s and 80s. But the Peter Principle says that in any organization, people rise to their level of incompetence. So what it actually means is, you might have a good soldier. Now you promote him. He's an extremely good soldier. You made him the general, and he might become a bad general, because a good soldier does not necessarily mean that he'll be a good general. So, and after that, he'll not move anywhere. So people, the traditional system, they move and reach their level of incompetence, and then they don't move further because they are not able to deliver it. So, I mean, that's in a light-hearted manner, but we really look at whether the person has the potential and the capability to handle that bigger responsibility. And therefore, as part of our career development program, because we also would prefer that we promote people from within. So we need to prepare them. So we actually send people through various leadership programs, and we assess people every year on areas. There's something called Tata Leadership Practices. There are 10 Tata Leadership Practices, and then the expectation is different at different levels of management. But we assess people against the Tata Leadership Practice, how well you are doing on. So there may be somebody who's very good at execution, but may not be so good at planning. But in the next level, he'll probably have to be involved more in planning rather than execution. So then we try to give them training on that aspect so that they can be prepared for that next level. So really, promotions is all about your potential to occupy the new role. And if it's the first time when you're in a team management type of role, then your team management skills and leadership skills, all that also gets looked into.
Yes. There's another question from it's about the business. So Ansha Hussain, one of our girl students, is asking if Tata Steel is already a brand, established brand, and there are so many competitors of Tata Steel. How would Tata Steel like to become number one? How does it plan?
Thank you. That's a very good question. And this is something just like, I said, no, you never stop learning. You never stop trying to be number one. Okay. And the steel industry all over the world has typically been a industry that has not delivered very good returns to its shareholders, except in a few places like India. Typically, the returns from the steel industry has been very low compared to other industries. India is one of the exceptions. I'll come to that why. The main reason why it is like that is because most of the world, steel is a commodity, or rather all over the world, steel is a commodity. And when you talk about commodities, as those people who've done their marketing or economics would know, products are largely undifferentiated and they are required in bulk. You don't, products can easily substitute each other, etc. So the main determinant of pricing in the market is demand and supply. These are what characterize a commodity. Over the last several years, Tata Steel has been at the forefront of trying to decommoditize steel. And Tata Steel has a large portfolio of products which are not commodities but branded. And true brands in the sense that customer will come and ask not for steel but for Tata Shakti. Tata Shakti stands for corrugated sheets. Now, once it gets branded, there are so many other attributes that are built on the commodity that it becomes less sensitive to the commodity type price fluctuation. So this has been an effort that is going on, and I can say with a lot of confidence that in this area of branding products and supporting it with marketing and delivery systems and all that, Tata Steel is way ahead of its competitors. In fact, it is probably in some areas leading. I mean, it could be a role model for other companies in the world as far as this management of branded products is concerned. And several of their brands are in the world-class brands list. Having said that, if you look at the total volume of steel that is sold, very little is sold in the branded form. That is why the industry as such is still in a commodity area. And which is why you read about steel prices suddenly going up when demand exceeds supply, and then suddenly it will come down when supply exceeds demand, etc. So these are all characteristics of a commodity, but for quite a lot of its business portfolio, Tata Steel has moved out of the commodity space. It's got branded. So it has also got an initiative called Services and Solutions, which are to promote applications of steel products, which may contain a little bit of steel, like ready-to-build houses under the brand name of Nested, or steel doors and windows under the brand name of Pravesh. And these are all, when you move away from a commodity, then you are getting into areas which bring in, maybe the volumes may be low today, but they bring in higher margins, less price volatility, better customer connect and loyalty. And in the future, Tata Steel definitely is going to have a large portfolio of those products, which will be a significant part of their revenue and profit. So therefore, I think that Tata Steel will very much be there in the numero uno position. In terms of maybe total steel production, etc., as people put up capacities, that position may change, because this is not something where you put up capacities in little bits. Capacity is added as 5 million tons. So today somebody put 5 million, tomorrow the next person puts 5 million, that position will change. But that is really not really a very good indicator of market leadership.
So as just one taking cue from what you said, as we have seen earlier in many of those like Tata Pravesh, being an innovative product, because by in due course of time, when it gets accepted by customers, it becomes a functional or a commodity item. So like the GI pipe, we don't say GI pipe, we go and say, people go and say Tata pipe. Tata pipe, charging, half an inch, something like that. So, how long do you think this Tata Pravesh will is likely to become a more of a functional than innovative item? I mean,
I think in many cases where it's a B2C, it's more likely that it will retain its brand advantages much more than in the B2B space. So if you take Tata Pipe, it is somewhere in between. Mostly it's a B2B type of thing where the customer is able to specify everything, and so let's say the preference may not bring that much of premium, but in a B2C type of situation, preference can lead to huge premium. Just look at products like Apple and all that.
Right.
So today, a lot of Android phones are, probably having a lot more functionality than an iPhone, but the phone still has its cache, and people probably are willing to spend twice what they spend on an Android phone to get an iPhone. So the B2C, many other emotional dynamics come into the fray, and that is what Tata Steel and any other company that does branding, it's trying to do with its brand. So I think that it's not going to get into that commodity space very soon. It is building a very strong B2C connect. So it's a lot of time.
Another countries, so now the country is going through, world is going, as such our country is also going through a bad phase, GDP being low. How do you feel that, what's your opinion that Tata Steel can contribute to an upturn or change the GDP?
Well, the steel industry is an important component of GDP. I don't remember the exact figure, but as a multiplier, about 10 years back, the GDP had a positive relationship to the growth in GDP had a positive relationship to the growth in steel, which is, say, the steel market expanded by 1% corresponds to a GDP expansion of 1.4 or something. Now it is more or less, even as more and more steel is being used for infrastructure and all that. So even though the GDP is low, now this comes to that commodity aspect. For the ever since the lockdown, steel has been going through a boom world over. And this is a totally one of the few sectors that are actually shown a reverse trend. And one can always say that the reason for it is there is a economic revival in the US. There's a huge economic revival in China. So there's a lot of steel consumption. China has stopped exporting. China accounts for 40% of the world's steel consumption and about 50-55% of the production. And then, so they've stopped exporting, and there's a huge domestic demand. So everybody else has started exporting to China. And the demand exceeds supply. So the prices have just started moving up. Steel prices have gone up much more in the last 6 months than it has in the last 20 years. So it has almost doubled. So you can see that, and all the steel businesses, steel mills are making record profits, record performances, which probably we will not see. We haven't seen in the last 20-30 years, and we're probably not going to see it in the next several years. So it's totally, if you look at the steel bit of GDP, I think that there is a huge impact. I cannot tell you what the number is now, but because it's a kind of a record year for all steel mills, that if it wasn't there, I'm sure that the GDP would be down by definitely at least 1 percentage point easily.
There is a question from our guest. So, John, do you think it is more beneficial to be highly specialized or be a jack of all trades or generalist?
Well, I think the short answer is that you'll have to focus on something. So there is this concept of value discipline in management parlance. I think there was a book called The Discipline of Value Leaders that been very popular. I don't recall now the names of the others, but it led to this concept of value discipline, which is they talk about either cost focus or best product focus or best solution focus. And the three companies that time were considered. I think we can talk about contemporary companies. So if you look at best product focus, it's a company like Bose in the audio thing. They would just like to design and deliver the products, and position it as the best product that you can get. So their entire system. So they are not intending to make the cheapest product, or they're not going to make the most versatile product. Rather, most products are very focused on delivering high audio quality, and it may not have so much of connectivity typically than many other competing things. Whereas if you take and their entire system, the work processes in the organization is all directed towards this. Whereas if you take, let's say, Indigo Airlines, their focus is best cost. So their entire work systems are focused on delivering that. So you will not find free magazines or freebies inside the aircraft or anything like that. It is, you just get the core product and that is it. They want to be a low cost airline that's the best, that flies on time, whatever. Whereas if you take a company like IBM, the earlier times, now IBM is up, they were focused on providing the best solution. So the strength of IBM was that they could bring the hardware and software together and offer you the best solution for, customized solution for your organization. So the point I wanted to say is that you have to select one of the value disciplines. And you can't be a jack of all trades, and you can't be the cost focused producer as well as the best products producer as well as the best solution provider. From that point of view, you can't be the jack of all trades. You will not succeed because organizational systems, everything that requires to support that is different. So you will need that focus. So that's within that focus, you may have a large number of products, etc. That's different. But your value discipline has to be largely specific.
Right. There's a question from our professor Shubhendu Majumdar saying the commitment and the team building interventions in Tata Steel or Tata Group as a whole for years, how it has been able to maintain the stability in the competitive environment.
Yeah, it's a very nice question, and this is one of the challenges that we deal with, because maybe 25-30 years ago, the Tata name still is a big draw for anybody joining an organization, because the Tata Group is a very values focused group, very employee centric, and they try to ensure that people are dealt with very ethically and very fairly. You might have seen that recently Tata Steel has announced many companies in the Tata Group have announced certain benefits for people who pass away due to COVID to support their families. So I would say that there are very few companies who would make that sort of commitment upfront. So there is a whole lot of focus on providing employee engagement. Let me put it that way. One is providing employee engagement in the workplace, being forward looking. So there's a great deal of focus on diversity and inclusion. So, there's a great deal of focus on providing a respectful workplace and making sure that even though the Tata Group may not be the highest paying employer, but it definitely provides one of the happier and more secure working environments for a person. And so coming back to team building interventions or commitment, etc. So first of all, the organization invests in developing employees. So we believe that when we bring somebody into the family, we have a responsibility to make sure that that person succeeds. So there's a great deal of effort that's put in developing people, and in an environment that the person feels is very fair and very supportive, and that builds commitment. So it's one of the groups where people typically stay for a very, very long time, or maybe their lifetime. And there are in Tata Steel, there are many examples of many generations of people who have worked. Having said that, it is a dynamic labor market for high performing executives. There are always people competing for their skills. And therefore, any company, including the Tata Group, would like to retain them by providing them with the right type of environment where both personal and professional development can take place, and they can have growth, they can have exposure. And so there is definitely a great deal of retention at the senior levels. Most of the movement takes place at the, you can say, entry to about 5 years, 6 years, that type of level, where people really want to try out different experiences or get different qualifications. And there is also the opportunity to move into other companies within the Tata Group, and you can be sure that the value systems are similar. And so therefore, the whole lot of opportunities and development interventions. Many of the people who are seen as potential for leadership roles, they go through specific leadership training in sometimes in India, sometimes abroad. So you're given exposure to some of the best learning opportunities and teaching faculty in the world. And that is all something that other companies may not be able to offer, and the Tata Group is able to offer. So, definitely, it's not a perfect world. So there will be some attrition, but largely the Tata Group has been able to hold on to its leadership team members.
Right. Mr. Stefanos, it was, people have been eager to join, but because of the bad weather, most of the places I was hearing, a lot of thunder shower. So
yes.
What has happened, and they are not being able to get access to this.
Even I was afraid that there might be some disruption because the thunder and lightning.
So, in fact, I had kept both my phone and computer on alongside, so that I don't miss out. Anyway, it was a pleasure having you here. It was really all of us, faculty and students, were really delighted to having been able to listen to you and get your views and thoughts. I suppose this is not the only one or the last one. We'll be again listening to you, to your wisdom that you've gained through years, and the Tata culture will come to know more from you. So, but for today, I think we will thank you, and really thankful for the insightful delivery and the insight that you have delivered. We are all of us are really grateful to you. And on behalf of Calcutta Business School, its management team, I thank you so much. Thanks a lot, and take care, stay safe, and be.
Thank you, Professor Sengupta. Thank you very much, and thank you for all the people who were attending. It's a pleasure talking to you all, and wish you safe and sound.
I think, Madam Prabhuti, what
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. And, we would invite you to our campus when we start, moving physically. So that would be a pleasure, so that you can physically address all the students, because that's going to be different.
I look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
And thank all the guests who have joined us. Mr. Ujjwal Majumdar is here. Oh, sorry, would like to say something?
Thank you. Bye-bye. I'll take leave.
Bye. Bye.